Good morning, everybody, and happy Friday. I hope that all of you are doing well on this beautiful Kansas morning and that you've been well since we've seen you all last. We're here today, my clock reads 9:30. We're here today for our Early Childhood Recommendations panel meeting, and I'm so glad that you each took the time to join us today. We're going to have the opportunity today to reflect on how our state is doing as we respond to the pandemic about 6 months in, and we're also going to have the opportunity to dig in more deeply to get a better understanding of the various councils and committees and work groups that we have in the state who are all working towards our shared goal of strengthening our Kansas early childhood system. So welcome. Thanks so much for all of you for being here. As a reminder, this is a remote meeting, so just a couple of housekeeping items. We are meeting today remotely via Zoom, and members of the public can watch via YouTube on the Children's Cabinet page. If people visit the Children's Cabinet webpage, which is there on the slide, they can get to that by going to the Children's Cabinet website and then clicking on the About tab, selecting Early Childhood Recommendations panel, and selecting Meetings to find our agenda for today, our slides for today, and the link to see this meeting on YouTube. Each panel member, please do make sure that microphones, phones, etc. are muted when you're speaking so that we can make sure that people who are listening remotely can hear well. And I know that we've all gotten to be experts at that in the past several months. The chat function that we have today will be used to communicate with me and to Lindsay O'Ryan, who's providing technical support for this webinar, but it won't be used to have interactive conversations with panel members. When you do begin speaking, please clearly identify yourself. And we also have a fun feature. If you all click the little 3 dots that say more in your Zoom screen, there's a feature for you to raise your hand. That's a helpful piece if you're trying to get a word in or as we're having conversations. Being able to do that helps me be able to see that you've got something to say so that we can help facilitate the conversation. If we do, when we do have motions, we'll clearly state those before the committee votes. I'll ask for a show of hands for each vote, and then I'll clearly announce the results of the final vote. We will not go into executive session today or a closed meeting, and the recording will be available to the public later on. So thanks so much for having all of those procedures in place. Here's our draft agenda for today. So we will take care of some housekeeping items at the beginning and share some follow-up from our previous meetings. We'll hear an update on the important work that's underway with our work group focusing on kindergarten transitions and have our regularly scheduled Kansans open forum. Then we will have presentation and discussion around the Kansas COVID-19 response. And I should note that the written agenda that you have is correct. That will be the first piece that we'll discuss here. And then we'll have a conversation around understanding other councils, committees, and work groups with an early childhood focus in the state. We'll then have requests for future agenda items and upcoming meetings. So the draft agenda that I sent out last week on Friday is the piece that we're discussing. And if anybody has a motion to approve that agenda, I would very much appreciate it.
I make a motion to approve. This is Lorena Kravitz.
Thank you, Laurie. Do we have
This
a
is
second?
Amy Meek. I'll second.
Fantastic. If everybody could raise their hands if they approve that motion, that would be lovely. And I will scroll through. Fantastic. Anybody opposed, please come off mute and speak. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. The first item on our agenda is approving our meeting minutes. We sent out those draft meeting minutes last week on Friday via email. Did anybody have any proposed feedback or edits to those minutes? No? Would anybody like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
Dave Lindeman, I move to approve the minutes of August.
Thank you, Dave. Would somebody like to second?
Cornelia Stevens, second.
Thank you, Cornelia. Same thing. If you would like to vote in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. Thanks, everybody. If you have any concerns or objections, please share. Awesome. Go team. We have approved our meeting minutes from August. Now I will turn it over to Debbie, our Early Childhood Systems Coordinator, to share some follow-up items from our last meeting.
Good morning, everyone. Just to recap some of the things that we touched on in the last meeting,
We had Lori Steelman-Kravitz from the Kansas Department of Health and Environment give a presentation on the Good Beginnings Last a Lifetime campaign, which focuses on recruitment, retention, and recognition of early child care providers in our communities. The conversation around that was from our panel members on how they've been working within their communities and with other groups throughout the state to bring recognition to our profession and to elevate that. And, what does that look like, and what kind of work do we need to do to keep that moving forward? Also important to include into the economic development and infrastructure conversations within our community. And so from those discussions, I believe Lori recommended that we consider forming a separate work group to develop some consistent messaging around that. And as a follow-up to that, Amanda and I this week met with Gail Kozad, who's one of our panel members, and Vicki Roper with Kansas Power of the Positive, which some of you might know as K-pop. And because a lot of our conversations on the panel keep focusing on, let's not reinvent the wheel or duplicate services that are already happening, let's partner together. And so K-pop is working on that messaging that is happening with chambers and communities, and providing that opportunity for childcare providers to train in those areas and to empower themselves to elevate our profession. So we are working for our November meeting, I believe. We're hoping that we can have K-pop come and do some more presentations, and maybe around that idea for the workforce group, maybe partner with them to make that work continue. So those are some things that are happening there. Lori, did I forget anything? Okay, and I know Gail's going to have a chance to talk about K-pop in a little bit. The other thing that I want to recap was our conversations around the workforce registry. And we did hear from Linda Logan, who's the chair of the Workforce Advisory Group, as well as Patty Peschel, who's one of our panel members. And they are working on developing components for the registry to recommend to the panel at some time in the future. We got a chance to meet one of our new cabinet staff, Hannah McGahee, who is the workforce coordinator. And Hannah has spent this past month getting familiar with the advisory group's work. And then also Hannah attended a National Workforce Alliance Registry conference virtually. That's a mouthful. But I know all of the panel members are looking forward to the opportunities that Workforce Registry is going to bring about, and appreciative of the work that all of the partners are doing on that. So I think that's all I have, Amanda.
Thank you, Debbie. Does anybody have any questions about those pieces, or the questions about follow-up from our previous meetings? Fantastic. And I'll share one piece that is so new that it didn't make it on the slides this morning. I am really appreciative. You might remember that when we were developing our role, norms, and procedures of the panel document, we reflected that there's opportunity to continue to make that more, to make that language more clear and simple and as easy to understand as possible. We know that that's a really important piece of our work. It's something that we set out for ourselves as a norm, so that anybody in the state, regardless of their familiarity with the early childhood system in Kansas, could really take our work and understand how it connects with their with them and with their work. I really appreciate Chelsea Schulte and Peggy Kelly coming together to take a look through that document and really look at it with an eye for how can we make this as clear and easy to understand as possible. When we say shall, do we really mean will or must? That kind of thing. They've done a great job taking a first pass through that, and we decided to take that and hang on to it. We know that we as a panel are going to revisit that document in a couple of months as we get a better understanding of our work work and as we're thinking through what we really need to make sure that we can work effectively. And so we'll have that set of revisions to consider when we do that. So thanks so much to Chelsea and to Peggy for your work on that piece. Next up, I will turn it over to Peggy Kelly and the rest of the Kindergarten Transitions Work Group for an update on how that work is progressing.
Thank you. We have been very active. We've had one full group meeting and broke into two small work groups to address two different pieces that we're developing. One is the overall MOU structure, and it became apparent in our first conversation that there is another piece that will really be helpful in communities in terms of operationalizing the intentions that the MOU sets out. So we have a group that's working on a worksheet. So we've got, terminology is a little tricky with this. So there's the template of the actual MOU, which is the document that we're providing for communities to be able to use to help their work. And then the worksheet is where it gives opportunity for communities to break down into operational steps of, specifically what and when and how is timing going to work. And that's an important piece in the sustainability of supporting the document. One of the things we talked about and had to be clear in our own heads about in addressing this is, we're creating something that's a tool. It's not something we're going to be able to demand or require of communities, but as a tool to support their work. But I'm really pleased with the way it's coming along. We have a meeting scheduled on the 29th to look at the products where we're at with the two small work groups and decide, are we ready to move ahead, or are there other things that those groups need to go back and work? And so we'll know after that how soon. I'm expecting we will have something ready to bring back to the October meeting to present, which was our initial goal. I do think there may be some other tools that we might decide we want to take on to additionally support this, but we'll decide that next when we meet. So thank you. And thank you to everybody on the work group. Everybody's been just really engaged and involved. And if anybody has anything you want to share in addition to what I've shared, feel free to come off mute.
Thank you, Peggy. Does anybody have any questions or pieces to share on that piece? Well, thanks so much to all the members of the work group, and we'll look forward to an October meeting on that really focuses heavily on this topic.
And I would like to say thank you to Debbie. It's been great to have Debbie come on board and just help shepherd this and keep us going. I can't say how much that's been helpful to me, and I think to the work groups too, as we're making sure things happen.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Debbie. We are all very glad that you're here. All right, next up is our Kansans Open Forum. As a reminder, this is an opportunity for anybody in the early childhood system who wants to formally share either remarks with the panel or written comments with the panel to be able to have this forum, to be able to bring those forward. This is in addition to other opportunities that people have to get involved. A great first step is to visit the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund website and get signed up for email updates. There are also regular webinars every other week at noon on Wednesday, an ongoing share forum where people can go online and share any thoughts, and regular meetings that are held with any early childhood stakeholders in the state after each one of the regularly scheduled Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund conversations. So as panel members are out and about, if you hear people who share, I've really got something that I want to bring to the attention of the state or of leaders in Kansas at whatever level that might be, and they're not quite sure where to take that, this is a great place for Kansans to be able to bring that. We don't have any open forum pieces to share today, so we will move on to the next piece of our agenda, which is around the Kansas COVID-19 response. And a little bit of framing for this piece. So we are now about 6 months into the pandemic, which is really hard to believe. And as we were considering how we wanted to use our time today and how we wanted to use the incredible resource that we have of being able to bring together really engaged stakeholders with varying perspectives across the state who think really deeply and understand really deeply about the experiences of young kids and families on a day-to-day basis. We got to thinking a bit, and we think that it's really helpful for us to take some time to be able to reflect on what we've learned in the last 6 months, to be able to identify any real bright spots or pieces that we want to carry forward with us as we continue to reimagine and consider what our future in Kansas will look like. And also to be able to really identify, here is something that I think is a burning issue that we absolutely need to make sure that we are addressing in the coming weeks and months. Some of you might be familiar and some of you might not be familiar with the Kansas Leadership Center and some of their work and teachings. And one piece that I always really appreciate is the idea that sometimes you can be in on the dance floor where it might feel like a waltz. It might feel, I don't know about all of you, for me, it feels more like a really fast, maybe like a tango or a square dance where you don't quite know the steps for the last couple of months. But you can really be like right in the weeds, right? You're responding to the emails on a day-to-day basis. You're figuring out, you're identifying, okay, here's the immediate next thing. And then sometimes you can really push yourself to get up on the balcony, to be able to look at the overall system and think about how the different pieces are fitting together, and really just take a deep breath and say, okay, here's where I think we're at. And this is our time to be able to take what we're learning in that day-to-day and be able to get up on the balcony and be able to reflect together. As we were considering how we wanted to lay this out, it feels kind of silly to say, but there is just a whole lot that has happened in terms of state responses in the last 6 months. And we started trying to put together something of a comprehensive list. And then we realized that we could present out in terms of federal, state, and local responses and initiatives and funding, and probably just talk for about 3 hours straight and not have any time for conversation. So we decided not to do that. Instead, we shared a little bit of background information. If you had the time to look through this background information, that is great, because it's some of the pieces that are out there. It's certainly not a comprehensive list. If you didn't, that's completely okay, because we know that each of you are here to represent a particular viewpoint. And even if there is a funding stream or a program or an initiative that has been created in the last couple of months to address COVID-19, at the end of the day, if you in your role are not aware of it, then obviously that's really helpful information for us to have at the state level as we're thinking about how to make that really work well. So a little bit about what's out there. The Children's Cabinet website is a good place to go when we're thinking about the overall federal support for early childhood professionals. There are several initiatives that have either been created in the last couple of months or are getting created and getting pushed out as we speak. Those include grants that have been created for individual families to be able to access childcare assistance through the Hero Relief Program, as more and more essential workers and others can access childcare supports. It includes funds to be able to support healthcare workers, other essential workers, educators, childcare providers, as they're addressing their own personal healthcare costs related to COVID-19. There are new pieces that the Kansas Department of Health and Environment is partnering with Child Care Aware of Kansas to get pushed out right now, as it relates to having a network of child care health consultants around the state and being able to use funds to be able to help licensed child care facilities do upgrades that can allow them to meet the public health guidance around responding to the pandemic. And there are ongoing grants. If any of you are connected to any of our home visiting programs in Kansas, there are funds that are available for families to have access to internet and to devices to be able to continue accessing those services. There's a great deal of resources on the Kansas Quality Network where they've been able to pull together many of these resources. And then there's one set of funds that are in fact incredibly new. They, I believe, were approved yesterday morning or afternoon. And so they are still it's still a work in progress as to getting them out. And so I really appreciate that Melissa Rooker, the executive director of the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund, is able to join us today to share kind of the latest and greatest about some of the recovery funds that will soon be available.
Amanda, thank you. It's really, it was gratifying to work with the Spark Committee because of their interest and awareness around childcare and the importance of it to economic recovery. So as we worked through rounds 1 and 2 of the funding that they put out, round 1, we offered our input, our encouragement that childcare be included in county level decision making. We offered some ideas, but we didn't play an active role in determining how counties spent it. Obviously, that was their local decision. Round 2 was our toe in the water. We have the $9.9 million package, which Amanda already outlined for you. And I encourage you all to get familiar with those opportunities that are open and exist and have available funding. And then round 3 is where the committee really understood that childcare is a component of business resilience and economic recovery, which was one of the 3 focus areas, the buckets, if you will. So they focused the business side. Yesterday, what the State Finance Council approved is $40 million for service to cover the cost of learning sites and supervision for school-age children during the school day whose schools are in the hybrid or remote learning modes and need a place to be safely supervised because they have parents who cannot work from home. So I want to take a moment to emphasize that first and foremost, we want to help licensed childcare providers with the capacity to support school-age children, help them access the internet and attend their school via the remote learning mode and have the supervision of a safe licensed childcare provider. That is first and foremost what we hope to do with these funds, is help those providers provide the services they need. And, you know, for those that have licensed capacity for that age group but are not currently open, we want to help provide the support, and it might be combining the child care health consultant program to help them do the things that public health guidance requires in order to get themselves reopened safely. But there is a perception, I've heard rumblings that this is throwing the licensed childcare workforce under the bus, and that is not the case. The program is designed to be supportive of the work you do as licensed providers. That said, there is another category of providers who are operating programs before and after school that are capable of opening up for the school day hours. So that's things like our Boys and Girls Clubs and our YMCAs. They too are eligible for these funds and will be applying. And then we are open to entertaining applications from other community providers, and they will be evaluated very carefully as we make funding decisions. This is funding that will be apportioned out on a rolling application basis. We are working with the Office of Recovery to get application materials finalized just as quickly as possible. We know some of this had to begin at the beginning of the school year for families, and there will be an element of retroactivity to the start of this current school year. And basically, we are working to get this up and running just as quickly as possible. The Spark Committee also recommended keeping in reserve additional funds. I think there's another $20 million in this bucket that we could draw down with approval from the State Finance Council. I would caution that there is incredible competition for the remaining resources of the CARES Act funding with, you know, a wealth of equally worthwhile needs. And so I don't know that we will get an additional funds beyond the 40 million, but the Spark task force was aware that it is impossible for us to accurately forecast the utilization. So they wanted to have some flexibility in case more funding was needed to keep children safe.
Thank you, Melissa. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. And
Awesome. Thank you.
if there are questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Absolutely. So really big picture context, everybody. When we're talking about strengthening people and revitalizing Kansas, or the Spark Task Force, that's the roughly $1 billion of funding that Kansas got from the federal government several months ago. We have until the end of December to get those funds spent. And so there's been kind of an entire infrastructure stood up and created to help Kansas quickly and effectively spend those funds. Emily Barnes, I think you've got a question for Melissa or a comment to share.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Melissa, for everything you're saying about the recommendation that you guys made. Because I can say, as a child care provider, you know, myself, and then also the work that I've done on CCPC, I've heard a lot of the skepticism and stuff like that from providers and worry about what this is doing. Thank you for making the recommendations that, you know, providers be supported to be able to provide the resources as they're able within their license. And I like hearing that that's a step. One of the things maybe to put out there is that it's in some way creating a way to get that message out to providers so that they understand the difference in the education need versus the childcare need, and helping providers understand some of those differences in what.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback. We will do our level best to emphasize that in all of our communications. I tried to make that clear in the webinar last Friday when I laid this out, and this is a program that we worked in concert with the licensing division at KDHE and the subsidy division at DCF, and they will continue to be involved because we have all worked too hard to improve the level of quality and the safety of our childcare network of providers, and we know how much work it is on your end to do the things required of you to become licensed, and we do not want this kind of program to serve as a point of dismantling all that we've worked so hard to achieve. So we maintain that focus and support for our licensed network of providers. I think that if you all take a look at the childcare the childcare health consultant opportunity very carefully, Childcare Aware will help us with that. That is intended to be a support system for providers who are struggling to meet the public health guidelines for safe operation. So whether you're open currently and struggling, or whether you can't open but still want to and need some help understanding how to enact the mitigation and safety protocols appropriately, and perhaps there are certain things you would like to do to make the drop-off point a little bit safer when parents bring their children to you, but you don't have the funding to get the plexiglass shield that might make that a safer entry point. The Child Care Facility Grant Program that goes in concert with the Health Consultants Network is there to, when you have your consulting appointment with the consultant, they will sign off on the need, and that will be you can start an application for the funds, but you'll need the certification from the consultant to be approved to move that application forward. But we hope that we've put together a package that is thoughtful enough to help you all meet the incredible demands on your programs and continue to operate to care safely for our kids.
Thanks, both of you. I think that was a really important point of clarification. We're going to now focus on two questions, and we're going to take them one at a time. First and foremost, and let's see, I've lost my mouse here. There we go. First and foremost, we're going to think about some of the bright spots, some of the pieces, either programs that we did not mention in our very quick rundown of what is currently available, any lessons learned that we have from the past several months, or any insights, ahas, practices that we really want to hang on to as we continue to move forward into whatever the coming weeks and months might be. I think it would be helpful for us to take to take some time to reflect on this piece. Do we have any thoughts, or what thoughts do we have to share?
I have a bright spot, Amanda.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kelly.
This is Kelly Mark from KDHE. Through the Spark funding that we've just been talking about, KDHE has $8 million for the Kansas Hero Relief Fund. So that pays for medical expenses for essential workers that have tested positive for COVID. That includes childcare providers, home visitors, healthcare workers, any essential worker, insured and underinsured, will pay for copays and gaps in insurance and things like that. If you've already recovered from COVID, you can apply to get back medical expenses paid as well. So there's a great website. It's KansasHeroRelief.com that has all the details. You can apply online there, has a telephone number. The program's run through KDHE's Children with Special Healthcare Needs program. So they have a lot of experience dealing with doctors and paying bills for paying healthcare bills for folks. So they are moving that program along very quickly. We have until December 31st to expend the funds. So if you know anybody that is in need, please connect them to the program and have them apply.
Thank you, Kelly. And I'm curious, do we have any panel members who either themselves or somebody that they know, they've maybe accessed the Hero Relief, the healthcare funds that are available for essential workers, or the additional funding opportunities that are available to support the costs to expand the child care assistance program for essential workers? Interesting. Okay. What bright spots go ahead, Cornelia.
Sorry. Well, we've accessed the essential worker bonus funds. And so we were able to look at the families that were enrolled to have some additional funds to be able to support those individuals that were essential workers. And so that was, it was interesting being able to just really see, the impact of, the number of people that were actually identified as essential. And so that was actually a nice thing to be able to draw down, funding to be able to draw down. We've also benefited from revenue replacement, and then also the other funds that are available for all of the additional supplies that we need now, just to be able to keep our facilities, where they need to be, and our children and families and employees as safe as possible. And so we've been very grateful, for all of the funding streams that are available, to be able to help us kind of get through all of this. Of course, they have to, that most of that funding ends October 3rd. We have to spend that by October 31st. So then what, is the question. But always grateful, of course, for what we have right now, because we do see a big drop in DCF enrollments and just enrollment in general, because we're in COVID and, with everything that's happening. And so having that additional funding in, to be able to help make ends meet has been very helpful.
Mm-hmm. And if we think maybe, let's pick a really far out time horizon. If we think like 5 years in the future, when perhaps we're in a different and new place, are there kind of lessons learned from those particular policies, where if we were creating or recommending something new that we'd want to carry forward?
Policies in terms of the funding, or policies in terms of the licensing things that we're doing different in our facilities?
I think both.
I think that there's a reality. What I hear people say sometimes is that there are a lot of things that we've implemented that really, in the big picture, maybe we should have always been doing. That it just, it seems like a little extra work now, but if it's actually keeping us healthier and it's keeping us, at a place, then shouldn't this be something we continue to do? And so, for a lot of the policies, just in terms of like the additional cleaning and the the additional screening kind of things. I mean, not necessarily that we do temperature checks for the rest of our lives, but for some of that kind of stuff, that those are policies and things that we would continue. Years and, looking forward, funding is available. I think that, a lot of centers have definitely benefited from having, the funding needed for the additional supplies, and you don't have to go through, a very large application process to be able to get it. And it's available for anyone. And so looking at ways to be able to sustain that, is actually very cool. And I do like that we've changed the eligibility for families to qualify for subsidy. And made it so that more families could actually benefit because they changed the income requirements. And so if that's something that we can keep, so that actually more families can actually receive assistance, long term, I think that would actually be helpful as well.
Thanks, Cornelia. Emily, go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to second what Cornelia was saying. Like, a lot of the policies, probably will last for a while, temperature checks, maybe not, but like some of the awareness for parents as far as, giving providers that voice to say, you really need to be aware of symptoms and keeping symptoms out and being active, that this is not an inconvenience. And so, systems improvement long-term is, taking this further than just the childcare environment, but also continuing to take the message out to employers to support families so that we can be keeping our childcare environments stronger and cleaner, with all the efforts that providers are putting in place. If we have it understood that, in 5 years, parents, employers are able to understand there is a absolutely substantiated need to keep children with symptoms out of these environments, because that keeps the general population as a whole healthier, that could be a major system improvement for a long-term goal.
And Peggy Kelly, I think that you've got a piece to add.
From a systems and I guess funding perspective as a whole nation, as well as our state, really recognize the role that childcare and early childhood resources play. And there's been an ongoing conversation for many years about, how do you pay for childcare? How do you pay for a quality workforce on the type of revenue that childcare commands, which is very small? And where would additional dollars come from in order to pay living wages and encourage a quality workforce and elevate, educational requirements and professional development and all of that? So I'm hoping that out of this, it will elevate the importance of this piece of our society and invite bigger commitment to public and private investment. I think it's going to take both. I don't think it totally becomes the government's responsibility. I think there's a role for business to actively invest as well. So I'm just hoping this experience and the fact that people are having to be very confront directly the role of how do you take care of kids and how it impacts in business in a big way, that it will just elevate the need for that and potentially bring some good conversation that'll lead to good policies and practices. And money. Because I guess because the default has always been, we'll just charge more. And the reality is there is a limit to the parent's pocket. And we know there's still a big gap between that funding and what it takes to really deliver the kind of early childhood and childcare system that our state and our country and our communities need. So
I think we've all had kind of the feeling at some point over the past couple of months where we've heard a business leader or another leader in our community say something along the lines of like, gosh, we like childcare is essential to our workforce. And we're like, yes, hooray, yes, like we've been saying that for a while. And it's Peggy, I hope that you're right, that that's a shared understanding that we carry forward. Melissa, I think that on the piece around thinking about helping our workforce remain healthy, that there's a piece to add.
Thank you, Amanda. I just wanted to tie into the fact that in round 2, the Spark Committee, State Finance Council approved a program for KDHE regarding an expansion of the testing protocols. And in that, childcare as a workforce was included as an essential workforce that was eligible for free COVID-19 testing, which aligns with then the fund that we created to help cover costs that gaps in insurance leave folks with a positive diagnosis to contend with. So I didn't want to leave that out because I'm not sure that's gotten as much attention as it probably should. So it's just an effort to help make sure that we don't have hotspots because of lack of testing. So that's been a big focus.
And have there been any members of the panel, as we're thinking about either access to testing or creative solutions to make sure that people can access healthcare, any lessons learned from this time that we want to carry forward as we're thinking about our early care and education workforce or our parents and families more generally?
Medicaid expansion.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was going to just kind of tag on to what Peggy was saying. I think just on a broader level, I think the conversation around really the comprehensive needs of families and, I mean, let's say childcare providers as well, right? So Medicaid expansion and access to healthcare, definitely one of those. If we had, I know in our own program with our early Head Start and Head Start families, I mean, we had families that were making more in unemployment than they are in their regular paid jobs. And so I really hope kind of on the same level that Peggy was talking about, that we've maybe had an opportunity to really have some discussion about how wrong that is and how families have very comprehensive needs. And so until we're meeting those needs, like food security, economic security, like children are not going to fully thrive as much as they could be.
This is Emily and Olathe, and I would say another thing also is to open up the conversation to the tune of the fact that providers need support in empowering themselves to be able to say, I need to take this time off to be able to take care of my health. It is quite frequent that providers will continue to work through, A, because they can't afford to take that day unpaid, or B, they feel guilty for asking parents to be out of work. They're concerned that they will lose clientele if they take the sick days for themselves and for their families. And so quite often you end up in a situation where you have providers who are not adequately caring for their own needs, their own health, and that compounds the issue. And so being able to open up the conversation to help empower providers to say, I am keeping your family safer when I take care of myself, and I need to be paid for this, whether that's through some sort of subsidy or whether that's through, policies within their own businesses. But I would suggest that to be a conversation because it has to happen. And it's outside of even COVID. There have been, other health issues that people have found that they didn't adequately care for in some stage. And so that's another conversation that I would like to see happen.
Absolutely. And Emily, one, I think that pulls us really nicely into the next phase of our conversation around what we should prioritize moving forward. The answer might be no, and that's okay. Are you aware of any other states, or have you seen any kind of proposals for how states might address that?
I'm not aware, but I am, I think it's absolutely worth researching. And so, whether I join in on that project, I've committed to a couple of different things, but, making sure, I think it's worth investigating in some way and figuring out how do we do this in a way that the ultimate goal is a win-win. We want families thriving and we want providers thriving. And so I think we do need to research it.
How about we keep that on our to-do list on the panel staff side, and we'll maybe look into, we've got some technical assistance available through some of our federal grant partners and some other pieces,
Right.
and we can just do kind of a really quick, even just a Google search and kind of state scan to see what might be out there on this topic.
Right. I think that's a good idea.
Awesome. What else should we prioritize as we go ahead, Cornelia?
The other thing that we're kind of processing now is, as we continue to move through the pandemic and get, as we approach the flu season and then what that will look like, et cetera. We have the funding that was available through the Families First funding to be able to pay people if they have to go home for 14 days because of exposure, or they have to go home for 14 days, after they test, or 10 to 14 days after they test positive, et cetera. But those funding streams only support 80 hours, of funding. And so there is a reality, given the fact that we work with human beings, that there may be another time, during this pandemic period, that they are again exposed, and that they have to have another 14-day quarantine. So now they've gone into their, sick or vacation time, to make sure that they get paid. Well, then another 2 months happens and they are again exposed. Well, now they're not paid. And so then do you really want to say I'm sick? Do you really want to say I've been exposed? Because at the end of the day, people have to eat, right? Like you have to pay your bills, and so do you really want to say I'm sick? Because now, I may have been exposed, and it might not necessarily mean that they were exposed at our school, but they are around human beings, like they're around other people, they grocery shop, they do whatever. And so, especially since we've, gotten to a place now where we accept the fact that the work that we do is essential, and there's awareness to that. And Peggy, you said all of that beautifully. So, I appreciate, the words that you use, and just kind of hopefully bringing the awareness to all of that. Long term, as we move forward through this pandemic, are there additional things that we can do to pay our staff, so that if they do have to stay home, that we aren't doing more to actually bring, the virus into our school, but there's more funding available to help pay them, so that way they can stay home and don't have to choose between paying bills, or going to work.
I'm seeing lots of nods to that. So thank you, Cornelia, for raising it. Go ahead, Hannah.
That just resonates so much, especially from a workforce stance. I'm thinking about how we know that both providers and people who participate in early childcare as a user are disproportionately, women, disproportionately people of color. This specific issue that was raised by the pandemic of insufficient paid time off, I mean, it just has created such a chasm where, from a social stance, we have an obligation to one another to be transparent about when we're not feeling well, but financially and, just within our own household, it's very difficult to do that. And so I think moving forward, even when we get outside of this 3-month period where we have all this funding, like Cornelia was saying, this expectation of transparency about our own personal health and that social obligation to one another, it needs to be continued. But it can't continue if people don't have those basic leave balances that allow them to take kids to the doctor or, be cautious. So I think we're going to have to keep working on that.
Thanks, Hannah. Other thoughts on this topic?
This is Gail Kozad, and I was just to tie into this it's there's the exposure, there's the with that act and the 80 hours, it's not just for you personally, it's if you have to care for someone. So if you have a child that's exposed, or you have a spouse that is exposed, so it really can eat away at that time very quickly. And we also know that initially there was the thought that once you've been exposed, you you weren't going to contract it again. And we know that's not accurate. I have an employee who has been exposed and contracted it 3 times.
Oh.
And so that is very much a reality, and already is a reality, 6 months into the pandemic, not another 6 months from now.
Absolutely. So recognizing that we don't have an immediate end in sight, and there's an immediate need that remains around making sure that people can quarantine as they need to.
Amanda, this is Debbie. And one thing that I think would be very helpful as we move forward, obviously this pandemic hit childcare providers in a very sudden way that wasn't expected. It was totally out of the norm. And I think moving forward, to have some kind of support available to help them see a business model that they can use to survive a pandemic like this. I mean, there's been talk about, having to close down, maybe because the provider gets sick, whether it's a home provider or a center provider. What does that look like? And how do you go about making that work for the sustainability of the business, as well as what is fair to the families? I've talked to a lot of different people that said, well, we kept charging our families even though we were closed, or we didn't charge our families because they, had lost their jobs. So, trying to put together some kind of a business plan, and this kind of goes back to what we were saying about, recognizing childcare providers as a business, and, what kind of support is out there to help them in times of trouble like this. And, this is a very personal point from my experience of closing my facility, which, were some personal choices that I made as well. But I think there's just a lot of people struggling. I mean, we automatically think the first priority is obviously the health and safety of the children that we take care of, the parents and the staff. But, on the flip side of that, what does that do to our childcare providers' business? And how can we help support that?
Absolutely. So an understanding of, or maybe an underscoring that being able to provide supports to childcare providers as small businesses is really critically important. Any other final burning thoughts or questions on not questions, any other final burning thoughts on pieces that the state should prioritize as we can continue to move forward? Or any next steps that you would like to see the panel to take in this area?
This is Deanna Berry, and I'm not sure if this fits in what you're kind of wanting to talk about here this morning, but I think that issue of like overall oversight at the state level of all the array of early childhood, programs and services and such that we have. And I know that a lot of that's been happening through this process, but I see that still pretty important to keep in mind here as we go forward when there are opportunities to just look at, how it's working. Are there different, linkages or ways to be more efficient, or make sure communication is happening, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So really making sure that when we're thinking about the governance and coordination as we're like rolling out new programs or evaluating existing programs, making sure that all the different pieces of the system are working together. Is that right?
Really, yes. And I think, as, discovering places where, oh, I didn't know we were both doing that, or if there are gaps, maybe if there are places where, that can be done. I just think that state level piece, this is such an opportunity to, maybe address some things that people have found. I don't have any really great example at the moment, but, I just know that, that it's across all agencies and different funding streams as they come along, and it just makes it it's complex.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it was March or April, I definitely found myself not really reflecting because things are moving so quickly, but in hindsight, it was really lucky that we had already done some initial groundwork to work together among the state agencies to strengthen relationships deeper than what they would have been maybe 3 or 4 years ago, because I really can't imagine what that would have been like at the state level to have been trying to navigate working remotely and dealing with a whole lot of change and not already having the kinds of relationships where we could pick up the phone and call or text or be able to connect. And I'd imagine that at the local level, it was really similar, right? Like if you don't already have the strong relationships with partners in your community, then the midst of a pandemic is a really hard time to try to make those happen.
Yeah, the whole just keep swimming thing happens, I think. But yeah, I just think there's probably missed opportunities over the years or things just because people didn't maybe know somebody or something. And it's just hard work to do that. But there may be some obvious, things that come up that go, hey, why are we doing it this way? So.
Absolutely. And Paula, feel welcome to go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. I think one of the things that I haven't heard anyone bring up yet, and I know they are just getting started, is the health consultation piece. I think it's going to be really critical to find a way that we can continue that role past and into the future, because I think as we're listening to, we're getting ready for flu season, we have the pandemic. I mean, I think that one of the things that we heard from providers is they really wanted support around, am I doing this right? What else should I be thinking about? And really having someone that has that expertise to provide that support and technical assistance, I think is going to be invaluable.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Emily.
So to kind of follow on, actually, give me 1 quick second. I need to answer the door. I'll go to somebody else and I'll come back.
Okay. I'll pop in one more time. This is Deanna again, kind of back to the Medicaid expansion issue, but also us looking at and advocating. I don't know how this works up in there, but I know let's look at our Medicaid codes and some of the things that people are trying to do to get around issues and the telehealth issues, and advocating like let's try not to, and I know a lot of people are working on that, but be more open to the telehealth or just different licensures that can get services delivered in places where we have such shortages. And so I think that's a big health piece too. So I know you are all aware of it, but I think keeping it on our list is good. As a group, we might be able to have some, collective influence on that with legislators or the powers that be that make those decisions.
Well, and I know that prior to the pandemic, there was, and our partners at Kansas Department of Health and Environment might have some more information on this. I know that prior to the pandemic, there was work underway with a handful of other states to look at how we can use Medicaid and really maximize children's health and well-being, like looking at codes and state plans and that kind of thing. I'm not sure. I would fully understand that that's a very in-depth project, and that the midst of a pandemic when there's a lot going on with Medicaid might not be the time to move it forward. But Kelly, how's that piece going?
Yeah, it's actually going really well. It's the Pediatric Supporting Parents, I think, is the name of it, PSP. It's hard to remember what the acronym stand for, but that's the work group, and we're still moving work forward. I was actually going to mention that as a bright spot from COVID is the opening up of those Medicaid codes and the advancement in technology for virtual visits that has occurred. We were able to get a lot of the Medicaid codes around Part C opened up. So yes, to be conducted virtually, and really would like to see those continue post-COVID, which there's no end in sight right now. They have opened them up indefinitely. So that was a really big bright spot for us. PSP group specifically, the first big win we got out of that group was getting the maternal depression screening covered under the child's Medicaid benefit during a pediatric well visit. So that was super exciting. What we're working on now in PSP is care coordination. So trying to get a definition, a statewide definition of what care coordination is and what it should entail, and then possibly get our current care coordination models able to be covered by Medicaid in the pediatric offices. So that work is still moving ahead even during this pandemic, and super exciting.
Yes, kudos. That really has been a very major bright spot.
Fantastic. Paula, Neth, I think that you're next.
I guess I didn't take my hand down after I already gave my feedback on the health consultant. So sorry about that.
No worries. Angie Sanger, go ahead.
I just thought I would tag on to many comments that addressing some of the supply chain challenges that child care programs have experienced, not being able to quickly get the supply needs that they, especially in rural parts of the state, but really, I think our team has been hearing a lot in really any part of the state, having to go back to the store repeatedly because of limits or even lack of availability. If there's things that we can do as a state to help address those barriers to make sure that the standards are being implemented for clean and healthy environments, that would be an immediate need, as well as something I think that would support providers in a traditional flu season.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts on this topic before we move to the next piece of our agenda? Go ahead, Emily.
This is Emily. Yeah. Sorry, I apologize for that. I was gonna support Paula's statement about like the health consultation and things like that. One of the nice parts in recent years has been the emergence of business planning trainings and how to effectively set up the business, the admin side of the business, in addition to the educational and development side. And so I think as those business grants and training courses continue, one of the major features of business planning needs to be, what is your crisis plan? And I know that's already in there, but as far as specific to health, like how do you write that into your contract? How do you enforce it? How do you, actually stick to your policies? And I think giving providers a chance to, work through some of that processing so that they can put it in their contracts and feel confident in it. And that way, then they follow through and care, caring for yourself is also caring for your families and your children.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody. We're going to take this. We're going to have fairly detailed minutes from this meeting so that we've got this feedback captured, and so that we can share it with other folks in the system, with our partners at fellow state agencies, with policymakers as they ask, what do we need to do to continue supporting early childhood as we continue to move forward in the pandemic. So we'll be taking those and sharing those out. And if you have feedback on the minutes, please do share them so that we can make sure that we've accurately captured the key takeaways from this conversation. We did not queue it up this way, but the comments that Deanna made about making sure that we are all aware of what's going on and connected to one another, and that we've got a system that is working well, really does tie beautifully into the second piece that we're going to talk about today. So thank you, Deanna, for that lovely cue. I will say, so we are halfway into our meeting and it's a Friday and we've been on a lot of Zoom. So we're going to take like 15 seconds to stretch, to stand if we need to roll our shoulders out, to reflect that we should really do that a lot more often, and to say, all right, we're going to have a good second half of our meeting today. So our goal we've got twofold goals for this discussion. One, we want to make sure that we all have a better understanding of just the groups that are out there. It can be really, really hard, even on a state agency level or to go to different meetings and try to understand, okay, what's the purpose, what's the bigger picture, how do all of these fit together, and who is working on what. So we want to make sure that we as a panel have a good understanding of what other groups and councils and committees in the state work on early childhood issues, so that we can understand, okay, here's where the gaps and here's where we can do work, here's how we can identify opportunities, and here's where we can feel confident that there might be a different group that is better positioned than us to advance work on an issue in a meaningful way. And then we want to be considering, obviously the panel is very new, Debbie and some of our other staff members are very new. And so this is our opportunity to dream about how we want our system to work together, and to think about, okay, how do we really want to make those connections, make sure that we have relationship building and warm handoffs on issues, and that we're really able to function together. As we were doing this, one of the things that I really love about Kansas is that we are a very collaborative state, and we are really willing to volunteer our time and to pull together and to create groups to be able to move work forward. That's something that we really identified in our needs assessment, and it's something that I appreciate every day that I get to work with Kansas early childhood stakeholders. It also means that we have a whole bunch of groups. And so as we were going through, we realized that many of these groups have representation here on the panel. And so Debbie has been working with those groups this last week to make sure that we could share just kind of a general overview of what the work is. But what we'd like to do and what we plan to do is to go through each of these groups and to kind of open it up and say, all right, would a member of this group like to share, recognizing that it's not a pre-planned or canned presentation, but really to make this a conversational piece. We might not get through all of the groups today, and that's okay. The nature of this conversation is that we'll get through what we get through, and then around 11:15, 11:20, we'll have kind of a big picture conversation and wrap up. So to get a sense for what this will look like, I'll kick us off. One group is this early childhood recommendations panel, and our job is to serve as an advisory group to the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund in their role as the state designated early childhood advisory council, which means that we're here to really be a think tank, to really be able to dive in and do technical work as needed, to be able to pull together expertise, and to be able to support the Children's Cabinet in their work. Right now, obviously, as we've discussed today, we are developing tools to support communities as they promote smooth transitions into kindergarten, and that's going to be an area of focus for our work in the coming months. And we are also here to, what we just did and what we'll continue to do, the big picture feedback that we're providing helps inform the implementation of our state strategic plan for early childhood and other big statewide initiatives. And there's obviously our website for people who are interested in learning more. This is just a quick roadmap of the groups that we're going through today. So a couple of caveats. This could be a larger list if we wanted it to be. There are obviously other groups in the state that occasionally discuss early childhood issues or that do work that is connected to our work. One example that's fresh on my mind, because we were just visiting about it on our team this morning, is the Kansas Special Education Advisory Council, which advises the State Department of Education on issues pertaining to special education. That obviously includes issues related to our young students who receive special education services, but it's also a much broader project than just early childhood. So we tried to, as we were pulling together this list of what we talk about today, we tried to focus on groups that are really closely connected to our early childhood system. But we fully understand this list might not be complete. And if there is a group where you're looking at this and you're saying, gosh, there is something that should really be on that list, we can absolutely add to our shared understanding of the groups that are out there in the future. So that is our big picture disclaimer. We'll start out with a group that we discussed in quite a bit of detail last meeting. Do we have anybody from the Workforce Development Advisory Group who would like to share a little bit about recapping that group and some of its current priorities?
Is Linda on this call?
I lost my mouse here. There we go. Let's see.
She is not.
There's Patty. Okay.
Yeah, this is Patty Peschel. And just, I think this here recaps it well, but again, we're working on, most recently, the focus was on the registry. We had an opportunity to invite in John Hopkins and provided a good overview of what a registry was for this group. So that continues to be a focus for us, looking at what components we really feel from the lens of a workforce advisory group, thinking about how this can really further, the quality of childcare in Kansas, looking at a registry from that stance. So really what components we would like to see in a registry, and we've been working on a document for that. Also, part of this group, the focus has been on career pathway and the core competencies. We really haven't done anything most recent about that. The focus has been on the registry, but then also there is a subcommittee that is talking to looking at addressing the equity of care of our workforce. And there's a part of that subcommittee, we are looking at a presentation to come forth to workforce advisory group to see what more we can do around that. So we're actively working. Again, this is an open advisory group. So if you are interested in joining this work, please reach out to Linda Logan, and her email's listed there, and we can make sure that we get you a part of that. And we do meet via Zoom. So.
Thanks so much, Patty, for leading us off. And I know that we got to visit about this group in depth last month. So it's kind of when we're thinking about workforce related issues, especially as we think about the registry and also eventually those Kansas career pathways and core competencies, this will be kind of our first mental go-to for, okay, we know that we've got a great group of folks who are working on this in quite a bit of detail. Next up, we previewed this a little bit earlier, but I'll turn it over to Gail to explain the Kansas Power the Positive Coalition.
You're just going to throw me to the wolves, huh, Amanda?
We are not wolves. We are a friendly group of people here on this panel, and we are eager to visit in an interactive way this morning.
Absolutely. So this is Gail Kozad, and we are Kansas Children's Service League helps facilitate the Kansas Power of the Positive Coalition. It has been in place now for, I believe, about 8 years. I think that's, Amanda's shaking her head, so I think that's pretty close. It started through some private funding, and the whole purpose was to bring state leaders together to work on how to create messaging and social norms change around adverse childhood experiences and educate people about adverse childhood experiences and what that means and the impact on your community as those children become adults. So as we've moved into our second round of funding, essentially, so that was kind of, we're still doing public engagement and education campaign, but that was really the first 4 years was very focused on the adverse childhood experiences study. What does that mean? The impact on the community. We're continuing to do that. This year so far, we've had 91 people who participated in that particular training. And I can't even remember how many people we trained in the first 4 years. With the Kids Are Good Business, part of that is also education. And we are doing more specifically targeted trainings, which Amanda and Debbie alluded to earlier this morning, that is around family-friendly workplaces. And it's a lot of conversations and trainings with businesses, chambers of commerce, community people, community businesses, both small as well as large. We have trained 664 people from January through June 30th of this year so far in that. And we also with that have the employee survey. So we have worked with, 3 businesses in this past year, and we're bringing on, I believe it's 3 additional businesses this year. The purpose of the employee survey is twofold right now. One, it's to kind of validate the survey so that we can then have that as a product at a later point in time that businesses can utilize. And we're working with Wichita State University around that. And then the second is from that employee survey, we're working on toolkits that then, based off of what employees identify is a need in their particular business, a business can then ask for a toolkit around how to maybe implement those family-friendly practices. What we have been learning in those conversations is that childcare is probably one of the biggest identified needs, and it's also the area that many of the businesses we have talked to have identified as they feel like it's an easier win, although I think they're, as we've been discussing, they're realizing there are some challenges around that. But it is something that people can latch on to pretty quickly. And sometimes we encourage the businesses that we're working with to think about to maybe start with smaller baby steps, like implementing paternity leave and things like that. So things that they maybe can do without maybe as large of an investment, but continue to work towards the need for quality childcare for their employees. So that is the work that we are doing. It consists of people across the state, business leaders, as well as state government leaders, as well as nonprofit leaders. You can see, just from our panel, the number of people that are participating on that, and it's a lot larger than that as well. So, and you'll hear more about it in November, hopefully.
Thank you, Gail. So yes, so I should have noted at the beginning, the panel members in that right-hand column, those are members of the panel who are on the group. We're pretty sure that we got it right, but that's not the entirety of any of these coalitions or groups. It just shows, okay, we've got representation from the panel and we've got connections that come across. An exciting piece on the Power of the Positive Coalition. So you all may or may not, like me, keep the copy of the All In for Kansas Kids strategic plan on your desk. But just in case you do, when you go to, we've got multiple goals as a reminder in this, and goal 4 is all around private sector collaboration. When we're thinking about this goal in particular, strategy 4.2 is about promoting family-friendly workplaces throughout the public and private sectors. And we just talked a lot during our COVID-19 conversation around the ways that policies like offering employees paid family leave really impact other parts of the sector when we're thinking about overall family and child well-being. That strategy 4.2, those tactics that are laid out there are pulled directly from the work of the Kansas Power of the Positive. Instead of creating something new and different, we wanted to say, okay, let's bolster and really make sure that we can all do everything we can to make this be a successful effort so that we can achieve this shared goal. That Kansas Power of the Positive website that you've got on the slide has some really great resources around making the business case for early childhood. There's a very cool slide deck where you can pull and plug and play for what you might want to present. And it's definitely one of the first things that I send to a superintendent when they're saying, okay, we're trying to go to our local economic development corporation, or we're trying to have a conversation with our local chamber of commerce or Rotary Club. It's got a lot of great stuff there that just makes the case for investing in early childhood. So it's a great set of resources to look at. Thanks, Gail, for sharing about that. And we'll look forward to additional conversation in the months to come. There we go. Next up, we're going to chat about the Child Care Systems Improvement Team. So Lori, would you like to share about this group and the work that's ahead?
I would love to. Thank you, Amanda. So we are really excited that we have opportunity to bring the Systems Improvement Team back. So for those of you that may not know what that is, the Systems Improvement Team actually came together in 2007 and has worked as needed over the years. The team actually serves as an advisory group for KDHE childcare licensing. And it's a diverse group. We want to bring in all thoughts from perspectives of parents, business owners, agency partners, all that can be included. And we really focus on what is needed at the moment. And so some of over the years, we have had focuses on specific regulations, or during the Lexi's Law implementation, there was a lot of focus on how do we best implement, and the team really helped guide a lot of that. And so this year we're coming together. Our first meeting actually will be the 24th, I believe. Our focus is really going to be around increasing availability of childcare. I mean, that is the number one kind of thing right now. So we know that we have a part to play in that, and we need to work together with partners to make sure that we're moving forward the way that we need to. And so we'll be addressing things like the low numbers and the root causes, and hopefully we'll come out. And actually, I trust that we will. Every time the systems improvement team has come together for specific work, there's been an outcome that was tangible. So our focus again will really be on that recruitment, retention, some of the things that I talked about last time with Good Beginnings, but we're going to really dive deep into it. And so again, this is our purpose. You can see on your screen, this is our purpose right now. And that changes as it needs to change. So Amanda, that was very quick, but I hope that was succinct enough.
Absolutely. So I think for one of the pieces that I really hone in on is that first sentence of the purpose, that this really serves in an advisory capacity to the KDHE childcare licensing program. So my kind of takeaway from that is, okay, if we as a panel happen to get feedback or public comment or pieces that relate to childcare licensing, it's really helpful for us all to know, all right, we have reconstituted, or the childcare systems improvement team is a group that is actively meeting, and we can definitely take those pieces of feedback or information gathered at the local level and share that with you and the team to work on it. Is that right?
That is correct. And I just want to say that the work that the team has done over the years, like we can really look back and show where the voice of the team made an impact. So I mean, I just think it's really important when people are serving on boards that they recognize that it is valuable, and we can't do this without you. So we appreciate the members that are going to be on. Of course, every voice we want to hear. So I appreciate that, moving those forward to us. Any questions or concerns, Amanda, thank you.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. All right, the next that we have, and there's my mouse, there we go, is the Family Advisory Council. And Cassandra, I know that you're a member of that council. Would you like to share a little bit about some of the work that they do?
Sure. Hi, I'm Cassandra Sines. We do a lot of different things. One is we advise KDHE in, just some things that they're doing. They share with us some policy things and get our input as families with special healthcare needs children, just to see what we think that they should be doing, or if what they would like to do would be beneficial for families or not. And, they take our input to heart and, really value what we have to say. And if it's not going to benefit families, they, go back to the drawing board or, modify what they're doing. And we've written white papers, that can go to doctors or other type of providers to help them kind of understand what we go through as families of kids with special healthcare needs. And one of our latest projects is, as you see here, the Supporting You. And it's a program that people can sign up as, where we match them together to support one another. We have our support peers that are going to support a connected peer for about 12 weeks. And it's just, so for somebody that, maybe has gotten a new diagnosis and are, just a little concerned and want to know what they are in for or what another family has gone through and just need that little bit of support and little bit of knowledge about what to expect. And, because they don't know what to expect with their child receiving a new diagnosis. So we would love if anybody, honey, just a minute. Okay. Sorry, I'm remote learning too today.
I think the reframe is congratulations on being able to both remote learn and participate in this meeting today.
Thank you. So we're doing, just trying to help support other families in Kansas so that people just don't feel alone is our main focus with supporting you. We also have Kansas School for the Deaf is one of our other partners with supporting you. We are looking at another couple programs to expand in the next year for supporting you. We will be expanding our Family Advisory Council to not just include special healthcare needs. We're going to include more domains from Title V. And I think the first one is going to be women and maternal that we're going to try and bring on, and possibly adolescents. I'm not sure, but we will be expanding to all of the domains plus men, I believe. So over the next year or so, we will be expanding the Family Advisory Council. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Or I know they're working on updating our website, and that's about it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cassandra. So I think that's really important information for all of us to have. Kelly, I'm looking at you on the screen. Feel really welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that Title V, when we're thinking about those funds that the Kansas Department of Health and Environment gets for supporting maternal and child health, that really covers the life course in terms of thinking really broadly about families and populations in or just various people in our state. And so I think we all know that it is essential that our Kansas early childhood system be one where families have a really active role at the decision-making table. And so I think that partnering with the Family Advisory Council and supporting that group and knowing that we have that as a resource available when we need to gather input from families to help inform our decision-making is super helpful. In addition to our groups that have family members who are members. So thank you, Cassandra. Next up is our State Interagency Coordinating Council. And Dave, I think I saw you tapping on your screen to come off mute. Would you like to share a little bit about the council? Or was I wrong and you were actually answering your email?
I was trying to turn off the video.
There we go.
Just as a little background, the state ICC is a council that's established both in federal and state law. The membership of the council is guided by those laws and includes membership from our state agencies, legislative representatives. We have a requirement of parents as at least 20% of our council membership. Then we have appointments from the governor's office. As you can see, the council's mission is to address systems and services for young children with disabilities. And here in Kansas, we've defined that as children from birth through age 5. So other states' councils may have a slightly different age as they defined it in their state. Our role is to advise and assist our state agencies, the state government, around issues of children with disabilities. And you can see currently our priorities through some subgroups or working committees of the council to address social emotional development. We continue to explore funding for services and programs and challenges of having adequate personnel to provide identified services for kids. And then we've worked very hard recently at supporting our local councils at the local level. Through our Part C program, there's a requirement for councils at the local program. So we've really focused on supporting those programs.
Thank you, Dave. So I think this is a really helpful piece of knowledge for all of us that as we are thinking about making sure that every part of our system works well for young children with disabilities, that we have a state interagency coordinating council that focuses quite closely on that issue. And we are well represented in terms of team members who are on both. The next one that we have, or the next group, there we go, is our state home visiting leadership team. And I know that we've got a couple of people who are on both this group and that team. Would anybody like to share a little bit about what this group is and what it's working on now?
This is Amy Meek, and I'm from the Children's Cabinet, and I serve on this team, and I'll be happy to give you an overview. So the main purpose of this team is to elevate, sustain the home visiting system, early childhood home visiting system in Kansas. We focus a lot on how we can get out the awareness of home visiting, the importance of it, and really just try to educate, find ways that we can educate across the state of different stakeholders of what home visiting is and the benefits and the needs that we have to expand home visiting. We work, most of the members are state agencies that have home visiting programs, funding for home visiting. We also have representatives that receive funding for McV and those different models on the panel. And Peggy Kelly represents Kansas Head Start Association and the Early Head Start model. So we have a variety of people across different models because we really try to make this a group that isn't focused on just one model. We know that different communities across Kansas have different home visiting programs and may have more than one program. And so we also work to really make sure that we have the recruitment and referral systems in place across the state that help to meet the needs of families through the variety of different home visiting programs and models. One of our current priorities is to evaluate a universal home visitation model and how we might be able to expand that across the state. We have done quite a bit of work to see where different models are, where home visiting is in the state and where it isn't. And we have some pockets that definitely don't have any home visiting in them. One really exciting opportunity I want to share, and you're welcome to share out, is the Kansas Virtual Home Visiting Summit that will be next week. It is not next week, the week after, sorry. It'll start Monday, September 28th, and it'll go through October 1st. It's going to be happening in those afternoons. So Monday through Thursday, those afternoons from 2 to 4. It's a free conference virtual summit, open to anyone. You can find out about registering on the kshomevisiting.org website. There's a link, I believe at the top it says events or training. And if you click there, then you can find the link to register for that conference. So really encourage anyone to attend. You could attend just parts of it. There's breakout sessions of different topics to choose from each of those afternoons. So I think we're really looking forward to having a variety of home visitors, home visiting administrators, parents, and other people interested in home visiting to join and really have some active participation in some of those breakout sessions. So you can go also to that website and you can find where homesteading programs are. Lots of information. If you wanted to print, there's things that you can print if you want to share with someone about home visiting. And we really try to also kind of work on some core competencies, how we can align some professional developments, how we can recruit and retain home visitors, and really work to just strengthen the home visiting system across the state.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. So we all know that that's where that we've got a group that's there to provide advice and to move work forward on that really important piece of our Kansas early childhood system. Next up, Kelly, would you like to share a little bit about the Kansas Maternal Child Health Council?
Sure. So as we've talked about a little bit before, the Bureau of Family Health within KDHE is the recipient of the Title V Maternal and Child Health Services Block Grant. And the Kansas Maternal Child and Health Council serves as our Title V Advisory Council for that block grant. So one of the main purposes of the council is to help develop and to help move forward the work of our state action plan that we form every 5 years in Kansas. The council works together as a large group, but we have small domain groups that cover all of the maternal and child health domains, women and maternal, perinatal and infant, child, adolescent, and children with special health care needs. As Amanda alluded to before, when you consider the life course theory, all of those domains overlap on each other and they all affect early childhood, right? So a lot of the work that we do affects early childhood. Some of the things that we have worked on recently are comprehensive well woman visit, comprehensive well child visits, a lot of workforce development, promoting bright futures, and the Bright Futures Toolkit that our public health professionals have access to. We've done a lot of health equity work recently, looking at the disparities that exist in the maternal and child health population and talking about how we come together to overcome some of those disparities that we see in our state. We meet on a quarterly basis. And if you want more information, there's our website right there, kansasmch.org. It has a section dedicated to the council where you can learn all about the members and the different organizations that take part and our structure and our guidance. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, Kelly. Next, we've got the Links to Quality Advisory Group. Rachel, would you like to share about this group?
Yeah, I would love to. The purpose of the Links to Quality Advisory Group was created to assist and advise the Links to Quality staff in the creation of a QRIS for the state of Kansas. Quality rating system in Kansas is known as Links to Quality, and it uses indicators and quality markers based on national and statewide standards. Beginning in the summer of 2021, Links to Quality will open to all licensed home-based and center-based childcare programs within 5 learning communities that were established during our pilot, and will include 1 additional learning community in the Northwest for a total of 21 counties. After this initial rollout, Links to Quality will systematically expand to all 105 counties in the state of Kansas. So currently the transition is our priority. And if you would like to learn more about Links to Quality and the people that are on our advisory board, the website on the screen will help you find out some more information.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks.
We have one group that we know is really something that we heard a lot in our needs assessment, and something that we knew prior is that when we're thinking about needs in our state, we really need to make sure that we're not overlooking children's mental health and social emotional needs. And I think that the pandemic has really underscored the level of stress that families are facing and the importance of this area. So we actually, prior to the pandemic, we had done a little bit of work in connection with the Children's Subcommittee of the Governor's Behavioral Health Services Planning Council, and we had been invited to their day at the State House. I think it was actually in really early March when Melissa went and had some great conversations and connections with them, and we had some plans to make a connection and come to one of their meetings following up. So this is a group, the Governor's Behavioral Health Services Planning Council is a group that's established in statute, and their website is here. And you can see the purpose of the children's subcommittee of that group on their screen. One piece that I think is really interesting for us to be aware of as we're thinking about this group is that they routinely provide very, very detailed recommendations to the governor in terms of what should be done specifically to support the social and emotional well-being and mental health needs of young children. So you can see some of the priorities of the council here. You can learn more about the group with this link, and you can know that this is a group that's on our radar as one where we can perhaps make some connections. There's been some staff turnover, or not staff turnover, there's been some turnover in the leadership of this group. And so this is on our radar as a group that we want to make sure that we can connect with. Peggy, go ahead.
I just wanted to call out that this group has done a lot of work around the Medicaid coding and what's available to support early childhood mental health and services to children and families. While I'm not on that group personally, I've just been aware of the work. So I just wanted to point out that I know the work has been going on around Medicaid coding. Make sure that this group has been, or their work and recommendations have been pulled in or could be pulled into that, since opening that up and making changes is not a simple thing to do. So.
Absolutely. I'm sure that Kelly and the team at KDHE really appreciate knowing that that connection's there if they didn't already. Thank you, Peggy. I appreciate it. We have two more to share on before we open up for conversation. One is around Family First, and I know we've got two Family Firsts. We have the first Family First, which was the Family First Prevention Services Act, which passed pre-COVID and is really focused at supporting and strengthening the child welfare system from a more comprehensive prevention-based perspective. And then we have the Family First Coronavirus Relief Act that's a different piece of legislation that had some COVID relief funds. So that's a helpful piece. This Family First is related to the first Family First. And it is, so we can see the purpose and the priorities there. I know that it's quite new, and so thanks, Debbie, for connecting to confirm panel members who are on that group. Any panel members who are on that group, do you have any pieces to share about the work done so far? I think they've met just a couple of times since this work got underway.
I can share. The overall group of Kansas Strong really has identified a few priorities, and one in particular is a subcommittee called the Can Coach, focused really on making sure that the workforce has the best supervision, skills, and tools that they need. And coming from early childhood background and coming into the child welfare, there's interesting conversations that are duplicated from both spectrums. And I think that there's a huge connection piece between the work that's being done with Can Coach and the potential of the work that could be done with the workforce team. So I'd say definitely keep that on the radar. And then there's been a few other work groups, in particular, doing some guiding principles around racial disparities and creating some template language that could be utilized for all agencies. It is an interagency work group that gets together that includes, for example, DECA, KVC, Cornerstones, TFI, courts and judicial systems, part of that as well. There are some things that are dealt with permanency, but in particular, the big focus has been on services for young children families. So,
awesome. Thank you, Christy. The last group on our list that we had originally listed is the Governor's Council on Education, which is really something that has been created to help bring together education and business and industry to think about the workforce needs of our state and how those sectors can work well together. This is something that began under Governor Collier's administration, and I was really excited that that Governor Kelly added early childhood as a focus at the beginning of her administration. It really, you can see the purpose of the early childhood subcommittee here, but when we're thinking about this group, it's a really exciting opportunity to be able to come together with business and industry partners, as I said, and groups like, or agencies like the Department of Corrections, the Department of Labor, the Department of Commerce, to really think from a business perspective. Some of this group's previous work has helped create some data sharing between the State Department of Education and the Department of Revenue and the Department of Labor to be able to match data about an individual school or an individual district and understand what happens to those children after they graduate from high school, like the kinds of industries that they go into or the kinds of work that they do. I think that that's so exciting when we think long-term to our early childhood integrated data systems, because I can just imagine a world where we're able to connect really across the life course and say, okay, we can see children who maybe received services when they were 3 or 4 years old. Here's the impact that that had when they were 22, 23, 24, or older and in the workforce. So right now, the Early Childhood Subcommittee has a couple of areas of focus: early childhood integrated data systems, kind of building on some of that previous work of the council; private sector collaboration, thinking about how we can support public-private partnerships in the state, and then reviewing the state's overall early childhood governance structure to make recommendations in that area. So I help provide some staff perspective for that group. Melissa Rooker is actually the co-chair of the subcommittee, along with Joe Reardon, who is from the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. So a great connection to our business and industry friends. So I'm pleasantly surprised. My clock says 11:15, which is exactly when we hoped that we would get to this phase of the conversation. Thank you, everybody, for being willing to share and being willing to have a conversation around this piece. I'm sure that we, as we're thinking about important groups, that we have left groups out. So are there, as we're just thinking about, okay, our Kansas early childhood landscape and folks doing work, first and foremost, are there pieces where you're thinking, gosh, we should really make sure that we've got a couple of other pieces on our map and on our radar?
This is Emily again from Olathe. And I wanted to make sure that people knew about Child Care Provider Coalition of Kansas, which is an organization created by family child care providers and to support the work of the family child care provider. We feel that it is important for providers to have access to strong resources and professional development, so that then they can become good leaders in our field and strengthen themselves as an educator. What we have committed to doing, I'm the advocacy chairperson for Child Care Provider Coalition of Kansas. What we have committed to doing is ensuring that, especially in this time with COVID, we have providers aware of fact-based resources. So, if we have information coming out of different organizations, we're making sure that we are trying to help the general public have access to true validated information rather than going solely on emotion. We want to ensure that providers have access to high quality training. So when we hear about different training programs and grant resources and things like that, we're trying to help pass that information along. We last year began a program that we are referring to as regional professional development, where we're looking at making sure to try to get some training resources into kind of the lower populated areas that sometimes can struggle to have access to a lot of materials, and so working alongside many of the other organizations, professional organizations in the state, to try to just support that need. And so I would suggest that we would be a good organization to couple alongside many of these that have already spoken today, because we're not here to reinvent the wheel, but we certainly can be a very strong partner and advocate for the family child care provider and the early
early child or children needing early childhood services.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you, Emily. I think that I love and appreciate that you highlighted that we have the important role that professional associations and private nonprofits play in the state as we're thinking about moving pieces forward. And when I think about statewide professional development organizations, obviously Child Care Providers Coalition of Kansas, a really important partner. I can also think about the Kansas Division for Early Childhood, the Kansas Association of Infant Mental Health, the Kansas Association for the Education of Young Children, the Kansas Head Start Association. We're lucky in the state to have really good, strong professional organizations that you're exactly right, don't need to reinvent the wheel, have good connections with their membership, and have the ability to either quickly gather feedback, which I think is a useful piece for us as a recommendations making body, and also to be able to share out information too. So thanks. We'll definitely make sure that we're thinking about that piece of the puzzle. Were there any in that list that I just listed off? Are there any other really important professional organizations that we'd want to include in that bucket?
You're aware of Kansas for
Oh,
sure.
mm-hmm. Thanks. Awesome. So I want to make sure that we have that we take a quick couple of minutes for a conversation, and the goal is really to inform the day-to-day work of the panel. In particular, this is we're interested in your feedback on how the panel can engage with other councils, committees, and work groups as Debbie is thinking about what her day-to-day work looks like and how she can help facilitate conversation, connections between parts of the system, and think about how we bring and share information to the panel so that we can make recommendations and do our work effectively. Do we have any thoughts, questions, pieces to share?
This is Kelly France Langford. I really found this discussion enlightening. I don't know that I've ever seen all of the different committees and work groups and professional organizations across the state being discussed collectively. Other than living within this PowerPoint and my very unpredictable memory, is there another place where we could consistently have this type of information and maybe look for, as I was looking, I could see people that were doing work across several groups, and I could see several groups that were doing similar work or would be a really good match to work together. I just don't know if a physical map might help.
That's an awesome point, Kelly. And it's actually reminding me of something that Amy said, gosh, I think it was prior to Zoom World. So like maybe back in January or February when thinking about the panel, that like almost having things together in kind of a binder or like in one spot might be really helpful as orientation. And then exactly as you're right, just kind of reference. So that's, I think, definitely something where we could look at using this as a starting point and turning it into some kind of resource that could live on, almost like a directory that could kind of live on the panel's website and help just show, here's what the system looks like in the state.
Amanda, this is Debbie, and I'm really glad that you said that, Kelly, because that just keeps coming up over and over again in different conversations that I'm having. And I know that it would be an ever-changing list because, it just never stops. But I think you're exactly right. And it's in the forefront of my mind as I try to navigate through, what my position should do and how we can engage with other groups. But I appreciate you saying that.
One of the things that we've done, I'm the director of the Children and Families section at KDHE in the Bureau of Family Health. And one of the things we've done to help our section, such a large section, is we created a staffing description document, kind of like Debbie is creating for this panel. But a column that we included on that spreadsheet is all the advisory groups and committees and work groups that each of us serve on. Mm-hmm. You're looking at all the people that you work with, you can see, hey, this person serves on the Kansas MCH Council and I want a connection there, I know that that's a person that I can reach out to. So it's helpful just to see the name, and just like we saw on these slides, oh, here's all the people that serve on that council. Here's all the folks I can reach out to.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, I think that that's a really good, actionable next step for us to be able to work on. And I'm glad that this was a helpful conversation. I think that the balance that we will strike, hopefully as a panel, is being able to identify where there are areas where we can do work that meaningfully moves the system forward, where we can make recommendations or move the work forward, and also where we can be able to recognize and say, okay, we're talking about something that's really important. How can we either get connected to or just be aware of what somebody else might already be doing, so that we can all work smarter and not harder, and be able to move the work forward. And I really appreciate Sarah Gardner, who many of you know from this work, is out there in the universe watching us on YouTube, and noted that this might be a really great place to add to the Children's Cabinet website, to be able to show not just for the work of the panel, but the overall early childhood system, our stakeholders who are working on this, understanding where we're moving forward. And Sarah, I know that you can't see the full panel on the YouTube, but people are nodding and thinking that that is a great idea. That leads us nicely into upcoming meetings. So we know that our October meeting will have a large area of focus around kindergarten transitions and the work that the work group has been doing. Do we have any other requests for future agenda items? As a reminder, if people have ideas, questions, requests that come up, connecting with Debbie is your go-to to be able to move that forward. Christy, I see that you came off mute. Do you have something to share?
I did, yeah, sorry. I definitely think I would like this group to take a look at the potential of right now. The barrier that we are seeing is that our foster families are not able to be licensed childcare providers from family childcare perspective without exceptions. And I think that that has been something that would be great for this team to look at, to determine a little bit more about the gaps and the barriers. And I think that that's a big potential from what we hear from their perspective. So I'd like that to be investigated a little bit more with this group.
Absolutely. So that sounds to me, and I'd really appreciate other panel members chiming in, but that sounds to me like it might be a place where we've got both regulations and requirements around being a foster care home, and regulations and requirements around being a licensed child care facility. So it might be one of those cross-issue pieces. I'm looking at Lori, who's popped up on my screen as if Zoom knew what needed to happen. Lori, does that feel like a good fit for this group, or does the child care systems improvement team?
To me, this would be more a systems improvement team. We do have a practice in place already for granting exception. But if there was going to be discussion, I think that the systems improvement team would be the best first place to take a look at that and see if there's any recommendations that can come out of from work on that end.
And Peggy, go ahead.
I don't know, and Lori, you may want this to be a discussion at the systems improvement team, but I know one thing that has come up several times over the years is just some differences between Head Start requirements and licensed childcare, since many of our Head Starts are also licensed childcare. That causes confusion. One in particular that came up was and it has to do with staffing ratios, I understand it, but that, Head Start kids and other kids can't be on the playground at the same time. And so it leads to, well, why can't we play together? And there's regulatory reasons, maybe some of those things we could begin to look at and say, how can we remove some of those barriers that are certainly well thought out and had good reason, but are causing relationship and coordination issues and collaboration issues at the community level. So.
Definitely conversations that need to happen. It sounds like, Peggy. So again, I think honestly that's a good thing to take to the systems team too. I think first of all, we need to better understand what the situation is, what the problem is, and if it's more isolated or if it's a statewide broad. So I love that we're already thinking about things we need to address in the near future for systems. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
Awesome. So I think I think we've made two good connections there to be able to make sure that we can move those topics forward. Any other thoughts or requests for future agenda items for the panel? Oh, and gosh, sorry everybody. There we go. There's the correct slide that matches. I've got both the screen share and a different slide up here. All right, well, you can see on your slide our upcoming meetings. So you can see that the Transitions Work Group has a meeting scheduled on September 29th. And then starting in October, we've got an important shift. So make sure it's marked on your calendars. We'll begin meeting at 9 a.m. instead of 9:30. That will give us a little bit more of a window if we do need to extend the conversation. We found that we are ending right on time, but we want to make sure that we've got time for additional conversation if needed as we are moving into longer topics. And we know that we'll be meeting via Zoom for the foreseeable future. So we will not have to worry about driving time or getting situated in a physical location in the morning. So we look forward to seeing you on Friday, October 16th at 9 a.m. and then on the third Fridays of the month for the rest of the year through June of 2021. I hope that everybody enjoys a really lovely rest of your Friday. It was really great to see all of you today. It was nice to have a really interactive conversation. We've got certainly a lot to take and process, and we are just so glad that all of you are sharing your time and your experience and your perspectives so that we can keep moving the system forward. Have a great Friday and a great weekend, everybody.